You know, when you picture the Renaissance, you're probably thinking about Italy, right? The great artists, the big thinkers, and for a long time, it really was this exclusive, elite affair. But today, we're going to talk about how a single invention took all those ideas, basically made them go viral across Europe, and kicked off a whole new revolution of thought up in the North. All right, let's get into it. So where does it all begin? Not with a masterpiece painting or some grand philosophy, but with a machine. Yeah, a single game-changing catalyst that was about to power a whole new era of thinking just by changing how information itself got around. I mean, it's pretty hard to wrap your head around now, but before all this, every single book had to be copied out by hand, by a scribe. The whole process was just incredibly slow, super expensive, and, full of human error. For the 80% of people out there working the fields, the issue wasn't just that they couldn't read. The real problem, there was literally nothing for them to read. Books were these rare, precious treasures, not something for everyday people. And then, bam, everything changes. In just the first 50 years after the printing press was invented, over 20 million books were printed in Europe. 20 million. Let that sink in for a second. That's not an evolution. That's an honest-to-goodness explosion of information on a scale the world had never, ever seen before. The genius behind it all was this idea from Johannes Gutenberg. He created these individual metal letters that you could arrange to form words, ink them up, press them onto paper, and then, and this is the crucial part, you could take them all apart and rearrange them to print something totally different. Because the Latin alphabet has so few characters, it was incredibly efficient. Suddenly, making a book went from taking months or even years to just a matter of days. And this tech, man, it spread like wildfire. I mean, just look at Venice. The very first printing press shows up there in 1469. A mere 30 years later, by 1500, the city had 417 of them. It was like the tech startup boom of the 15th century, and it was happening in cities all over the continent. And listen, this wasn't just about printing more copies of the same old stuff. All of a sudden, the great classical works from ancient Greece and Rome were widely available. Lawyers could get their hands on Roman law, which, by the way, created the foundation of our entire Western legal tradition. For the very first time, Bibles were actually accessible to people who weren't priests. And brand new ideas, I'm talking stories, poems, even newsletters, could be shared far and wide. It meant more people were hearing more voices from across time and space than ever before in history. So, what happened when all these ideas started traveling north from Italy? Well, they weren't just copied. They were remixed, they were adapted, they were totally transformed by the local cultures they ran into, creating something new and distinct, a Northern Renaissance. You can really, really see the difference in the art. Down in Italy, you've got the elegant, mythological beauty of, say, Botticelli. But up north, you get Peter Bruegel's paintings of these scruffy rural villagers. It's still humanism for sure. It's secular, it's focused on people, but it's a humanism that's grounded in the messy, everyday, rustic lives of ordinary folks, not just gods and goddesses and nobles. But for all those differences, don't get me wrong, they were still building on the same basic foundation. Both the North and the South looked back to the classical world as their ultimate source of inspiration. And they both totally embraced this Roman idea of the pater familias, the male head of the family, believing that a strong, father-led household was the absolute key to a stable society. But here's where things get really interesting. This new way of learning also started to push some serious boundaries. Humanists began teaching the original Greek and Latin, not just the medieval versions. And this led to a radical rethinking of some really fundamental texts, including the Bible itself. And some scholars, pointing to ancient women like Sappho and Cornelia, started arguing for something that was, for the time, absolutely revolutionary, that girls should be educated right alongside their brothers. So with all these new ideas swirling around, it led to this huge debate that honestly we're still having today. As more and more people started thinking about the human condition, they began asking this massive question: what's the best way to organize a society? And this is what brought rulers, realists, and idealists into this incredible clash of ideas. And right at the heart of all this was a guy named Desiderius Erasmus. People called him the Prince of the Humanists. And he was basically the hub of this massive intellectual network, writing back and forth with over 500 thinkers all across Europe. His big idea for society was what he called a middle road. A ruler should study the pagan classics to get wise, but then blend that with Christian values to achieve peace and work for the public good.
And this is where you get this fantastic clash of ideas. So on one side, you've got Erasmus arguing that a ruler should be guided by Christian virtue. But pushing right back against that is the ultimate pragmatist, Niccolò Machiavelli, who's saying, look, to keep things stable, a ruler's got to be willing to do whatever it takes. And then, way off on another track, you have Thomas More, who's asking, hey, what if we could build a society that just gets rid of the power struggles in the first place? And this right here, this is probably Machiavelli's most famous and maybe his most chilling piece of advice. He was a political realist through and through. He wasn't interested in what was noble or good. He was interested in what worked for holding on to power and keeping order. For him, war wasn't some kind of failure. It was just a necessary tool for any ruler who wanted to be effective. And then in the complete opposite corner from Machiavelli's grim realism, you have his friend Thomas More. In his book Utopia, More dreamed up this perfect society built on pure reason and cooperation, with no private property for people to fight over. It's a kind of strange book, to be honest. It's got married priests and divorce, which were pretty shocking ideas for a devout Catholic like More. But it represents this powerful belief that humanity could actually reason its way to a peaceful world.
So, that's the big question, right? Where do these huge, world-changing ideas actually come from? Well, the final piece of this whole puzzle is understanding that these grand political theories, they weren't just created in a vacuum. They were deeply personal, forged in the fire of each thinker's own life. And this is where we have to talk about a crucial voice that's often been overlooked, Christine de Pizan. She was writing a whole century before Thomas More, and she faced a reality that most male thinkers just couldn't imagine. After her husband died, she had to do something almost unheard of for a woman back then, support her entire family with her writing. In her book of the City of Ladies, de Pizan lays out this powerful argument that just completely challenges the world order of her day. She says, look, women are just as rational and just as capable of being virtuous leaders as men are. Her thesis is this incredible contrast to Machiavelli. It's not fear that makes a community good. It's the virtue of its leaders. And those leaders can absolutely be women. So we're left with this central tension, this fundamental debate that was running through all of these thinkers' work. What's the ultimate goal here? Is it about fairness, like More and de Pizan might argue? Or is it about stability at any cost, like Machiavelli would demand? Should a leader try to be virtuous or just effective? And this, right here, is the key takeaway from all of this. Perspective is everything. Machiavelli's brutal, power-focused realism, it came from a life of political chaos, endless war, and even being tortured himself. Christine de Pizan's focus on virtue and equality, it came directly from her experience of being an incredibly talented woman in a world that tried to shut her down at every turn. And Erasmus's more optimistic middle road, well, it was shaped by a different, maybe more stable, reality in Northern Europe. Their philosophies were a direct reflection of their lives. Which, of course, brings the question right back to us, because those same forces are still at play. These aren't just dusty old historical debates. They're questions we all grapple with every single day in our communities and in our own lives. So the real question for you is this: where do you sit in the world? And how might that be shaping your view of what makes a good society?